Story from r/pro revenge. Coworker tried to get me fired over breast implants, so I pulled a reverse Uno card. TLDR. A coworker harassed me about my breast implants, which I got due to a history of cancer. I confronted her. She reported me to HR. I gathered evidence of her harassment, and she was fired instead. I've been told that isn't what a reverse Uno is, but I can't change it now. Edit. Regardless of my reasons for getting implants, I still shouldn't have been harassed. It just highlighted Jill's poor behavior, which likely motivated her to report me. 4 years ago, when I was 24, my mother died of breast cancer. Both my grandmothers had also died from the disease, so I sought professional advice. I learned that I had cells in one breast with the potential to become cancerous. I was presented with a few options. 1. Regular screenings, every 3 to 4 months, but with a high risk of developing cancer due to family history. 2. Single mastectomy, remove the affected breast, but still require regular checkups for the other. And lastly, bilateral mastectomy, remove both breasts to eliminate the risk entirely. I chose the bilateral mastectomy. It was the most drastic option, but after witnessing the impact of cancer on my mother and grandmothers, I couldn't risk it. I was warned about scarring, but the reality was far worse. I was left with 2 large, pink, jagged scars on my chest, each about 1 inch long and half an inch wide. This led to severe depression, causing me to isolate myself, avoid mirrors, and experience physical discomfort. A therapist suggested consulting a plastic surgeon. While not their typical recommendation, they recognized my struggle and the potential long-term impact of the scars. The surgeon offered 3 options: cream, laser, or implants. The cream was ineffective, and the laser was expensive and risky, so I opted for implants. My natural breast size was an F cup, so I chose a slightly smaller DD. Since then, my mental health has improved significantly, and I feel much better about my appearance. My confidence and self-esteem have increased. I know I shouldn't place too much emphasis on appearance, but these scars were truly awful. They were huge, bright pink, jagged, and raised, and I hated seeing myself. Now, they're well hidden and barely noticeable. In the present, I'm 28 and working in an office. My life has improved considerably. A coworker, Jill, learned about my breast augmentation, but not the cancer, when my friend and I were planning a trip. She made a joke about me flying with implants, and Jill overheard. By the end of the day, the entire office knew about my surgery, but not the reason. Several people confirmed that Jill had shared the information. Over the following months, Jill made numerous jokes and comments about my chest within earshot of coworkers. She called me more plastic than Barbie, fake in 2 ways, and even referred to me as a sack of silicone. I don't know her exact motive, but she seemed to believe I'd gotten the surgery for free on the public healthcare system. I'd had the mastectomy covered by the NHS, but paid privately for therapy and implants. I repeatedly asked her to stop, but our conversations often took place in private areas like elevators and bathrooms, where there were no witnesses. Despite my requests, she continued her comments, at least 3 times a week for 3 months. My breaking point came during a lunch with Jill and other coworkers. When I mentioned something shallow, she responded, "You'd know all about being shallow," gesturing toward my chest. I snapped. I explained that I had a history of cancer, underwent a mastectomy, and got implants to conceal the resulting scars. I emphasized the importance of considering someone's circumstances before making judgments about cosmetic surgery. Feeling vindicated, I left the lunchroom. For the rest of the day, many coworkers offered support, while others defended Jill, claiming she was just joking. I countered that her behavior had been inappropriate long before my response. I then received an email from HR requesting a meeting the following day. The mention of a hostile work environment raised concerns. Knowing that Debbie, Jill's friend in HR, was likely involved, I realized I needed to gather evidence. I reviewed my contract and found a clause allowing me to request an impartial overseer if I felt my assigned reviewer was biased. I photocopied the relevant page and highlighted the clause. I contacted coworkers who had offered support, asking them to write and sign statements detailing Jill's comments. While not everyone was willing to help due to Jill's influence, about 20 people agreed. I estimated the dates and times of my previous requests for Jill to stop, as well as the lunchroom confrontation. I created a list of witnesses present during the confrontation. The next morning, I arrived early and collected the signed statements from my coworkers. Each statement included the writer's name, the date, the time, a quote from Jill's insult, and an acknowledgement of her ongoing behavior. Some statements even listed additional comments Jill had made about other coworkers' appearances. I arrived at HR at 10 a.m., armed with the statements, the contract page, and my notes. Debbie, the HR representative, was prepared to lead me into a private room. I immediately requested a different interviewer, citing the impartiality clause in my contract. Debbie argued that she could be impartial, but I insisted on a different reviewer, given her friendship with Jill. Supervisor was called in, and after questioning Debbie, he agreed to involve another HR representative. The four of us then proceeded to review the complaint. Debbie appeared visibly upset, as she had likely anticipated firing me. The interview lasted over half an hour. Here's a condensed version. Q. Why do you believe Jill reported you? A. Jill had been harassing me for 3 months. Q. Why didn't you report her earlier? A. I initially ignored her behavior. Q. What specific issues did Jill have with you? A. She was upset about my breast implants, unaware of the underlying medical reasons. I provided details of my cancer history and the subsequent surgery, referencing my medical records. Q. How do you know she was the one who reported you? A. I presented 16 signed statements from coworkers, detailing Jill's comments and the dates and times they occurred. Q. What specific incident led to the complaint? A. The lunchroom confrontation, where Jill insulted me and I responded by explaining my medical history. I provided a list of witnesses and a signed statement from one of them. Q. Had you previously addressed Jill's behavior? A. Yes, multiple times over the past 3 months. Supervisor concluded the interview and assured me that they would review the evidence, including the statements, CCTV footage, my medical records, and any additional information. I returned to my desk, prepared my CV, and anticipated a job search. Within an hour, the co-worker who had written a statement and witnessed the lunchroom confrontation was called into HR. They returned about 10 minutes later. Other witnesses from the lunchroom were also called in, one by one, for brief interviews. Then, the co-workers who had written statements but weren't present at the lunch were interviewed. By 3:30 p.m., it seemed like everyone involved had been questioned. Finally, Jill was called into HR. She returned visibly upset and glared at me throughout the afternoon. She complained to other co-workers about me getting her fired before leaving for the day. Later that evening, I received an email from HR closing the case. Next story is, guy quit his job thinking he became rich. Hey, new to Reddit. I thought I would post my story here. I work for a construction company, and we do remodeling on homes. We have a rule here that we get to keep anything we find hidden behind the walls. We hired this guy. We really needed a worker badly, who was a total jerk from day one. I've been working for this company for 5 years, and this guy had only been doing construction for 1 year after he got fired from his accounting job for getting a DUI. Anyway, he would always make fun of my clothes and my accent, and one day he went too far by telling my boss about my private Instagram account pics. He got on my phone, looked through my Instagram page, and showed my boss pictures of me smoking weed. Little did he know that my boss is my friend from 8 years ago when we used to smoke together before we both quit. I was so mad that he violated my privacy, so I made a plan to mess him over. He was the kind of guy who would always come in late and complain that trains or traffic were why he was always late. One day, I overheard him saying that if he won the lottery, he would quit this job for not getting the respect he deserves. You have to earn your respect here. One day, I bought some fake gold coins online and put them in a metal box I found at an antique store and waited for a chance to hide it in a wall. Luckily, I did not have to wait long. The day he found the coins seemed like it was his best day ever. The first thing he did when he opened the box was call my boss a freaking loser, and he quit immediately on the spot. He said, "Forget this place. I'm rich." Lol. Little did he know that was the best day of my life. After he quit, my boss told us that he was going to fire him anyway for always showing up late. I wish I could see the look on his face when he finds out the gold coins are fake. Best $40 I spent in my life. I apologize for my grammar. This just happened today, and my adrenaline is pumping hard. Thanks for reading. Edit. These houses are bought at auction. People don't live here, so everything is owned by the construction company. Next story. My wife is having a meltdown over our daughter's personality, and I don't know what to do. What should I do? I'm a 34-year-old guy, and I have a 16-year-old stepdaughter. My wife is 31. In high school, my wife was the popular girl stereotype. Pink, blonde chunky highlights in her brown hair. This was the mid to late 2000s. She was on the cheerleading team, had lots of friends and boyfriends, and was well known and liked. She was basically the living embodiment of the picture-perfect girl from those cheesy 2000s high school movies. And then she got pregnant. When she was 15, she had her daughter. She doesn't know who the father is, and any potential fathers for the girl up and left way back when. Her daughter recently turned 16. I never wanted kids. I found them annoying. But I fell in love with my wife and got married when she was 20 and I was 23 after dating for 2 years. We hit it off, and I married her, deciding to suck it up around the kid. I never planned to absolutely love being a dad to her specifically. Kids still annoy me, but my daughter, technically stepdaughter, was different. She was quiet and nerdy, even at a young age. I married her mother when she was 5, and we clicked right away. We went on daddy-daughter dates every weekend. I played dolls with her, let her paint my nails, and do makeup on me. I drove her to and from school in my cop car. We even did daddy-daughter duo costumes for Halloween. Over the past 2 years, she's developed a darker dress style. I don't know the proper subculture for her outfits, but according to her, she's dressing like a horror game protagonist and a Monster High character. Purple is the main color she incorporates into this specific aesthetic blend, as she calls it. I don't get it, but maybe that's because I'm a man in my 30s. She likes ghosts, tarot cards, vampires, zombies, aliens, and creepy Victorian dolls. I don't get it. But also I don't care because if it makes her happy, so what? She's also an introvert and prefers playing games on her computer or reading fantasy occult novels rather than hanging out with other teens her age. She has friends, so I'm not too worried about her being completely withdrawn. I'm just glad I don't have to drive her around much since she only has a learner's permit currently. My wife hates this. My wife always wanted a girly girl, pinks and pastels and flowers and all that. She wants our daughter to get a boyfriend, be more social, and be a cheerleader like she was. Which, in itself, is valid. I get it. I'm sure most parents have preferences for how they want their kids to turn out, and some disappointment when they stray from that fantasy is valid. Some. My wife constantly takes and hides my daughter's darker room decor. She buys pastel dresses for our daughter, tells her to wipe off her dark eye makeup, tries to set her up on dates with jock types from my daughter's school, and pushes her to sign up for activities like cheerleading or volleyball. I could have put up with all of that. I really could have. But a few weeks ago, I woke up to my wife finally hitting her breaking point. I woke up in the middle of the night to my wife screaming and having what I can confidently describe as a borderline meltdown. She was crying and saying all she ever wanted was a normal daughter who likes pink, is a cheerleader, has a boyfriend, and will give her grandkids. I had to drag her into the hallway after 30 minutes of this. I kept thinking it would stop, but it kept going on and on. My daughter was just staring at this whole thing in the doorway of her room. What caused this meltdown from my wife? My daughter dyed purple over the blonde streaks/highlights my wife had forced her to get in her hair, which wasn't even breaking a house rule, as my wife and I had both told her she could do whatever she wanted with her hair as long as she didn't stain too many towels. It's been weeks, and my daughter won't talk to her mom. My wife is still up to her antics, but now it's in overdrive. Every day she brings home some type of trendy clothing in pink or pastels and tries to give it to my daughter. My daughter is getting fed up and stays in her room all day. She confessed to me that she can't wait for school to start back up in a few weeks so she can get out of the house and be with her friends again. I don't know what to do. I feel like I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place. I don't want to side with anyone in this situation. I understand my wife wants a daughter she can relate to, and my daughter wants a mom who understands her. I don't know what I can or should do. I need help. I need advice. Update. It's been about a week since I last posted about how my wife was having a meltdown over how my daughter chose to dress. 2 nights after I posted, I sat my wife down and very bluntly asked her what exactly the problem was. She kept saying she just wanted a daughter who was similar to her, but after I kept asking, she broke down and admitted the real reason why she was having her meltdowns. My wife feels that her daughter is the only way for her to have more family in the future. She's estranged from her siblings, her parents don't speak much to her, and all of her friends from high school stopped talking to her after her pregnancy. She wants a family back and is hoping her daughter will marry a nice boy and give her grandkids so she can have a family again. She said she never brought up having more kids with me because she figured I'd be against the idea. I don't know how I feel about having more kids with my wife, but it certainly won't happen now. So my wife is in therapy to help her realize that she can't just view my daughter as a way to create a family. She's doing well so far, but it's too soon to really tell. My daughter is also in therapy. She's been in therapy since she was a kid for bullying issues, but now her therapist is trying to focus on the meltdown situation. My daughter actually seems relatively unaffected by this whole situation other than being a little annoyed, so I don't know if that's good or not. I took my daughter to Hot Topic for some back-to-school accessories and then out to eat, just the 2 of us. She's still excited to go back to school. She misses her friends. My wife and daughter have started talking normally again. They had a long talk, which I was present for, where my wife apologized for being so pushy and extreme with her wishes. My daughter was receptive to this talk and seems to be back to her normal self. I'm keeping an eye on both of them to be sure. My wife is doing her best to understand my daughter's interests. Last I heard, the 2 were watching a slasher TV show on Hulu as a way to bond, and it appears to be working. There isn't any bad blood between the 2. I know it's early, and things can change, but so far, everything seems to be smoothing over pretty well. Thank you for all the advice, both harsh and gentle, that I received through my original post. It definitely opened my eyes to what could have happened if I hadn't gotten both of them help and made them talk it out. Our next story, she asked me when I was due. I told her I was 12 years old. For context, this happened when I was around 16 years old. I have always struggled with severe endometriosis, and an unfortunate side effect of endo is severe bloating or endobelly. Usually, it gets to the point where I look very pregnant. Even after 2 surgeries, I still get it sometimes at 26 years old. At the time, I was 5 feet 6 inches and about 100 pounds, so I looked like a pole with a huge bump sticking out. I lived with my parents at the time in a small conservative beach town in Florida. Lots of old judgmental people. 16-year-old me was walking around Walmart, minding my own business, ironically looking for maternity pants because the bloating gets so bad. A woman, probably in her 50s, walked up to me and placed her hand on my stomach, happily saying, "Oh my gosh, when are you due? You look amazing. You're so young." Now, this wasn't the first time someone had asked me this question, but it was the first time someone had the audacity to put their hand on my stomach. I stood there for a second, just shocked, and then said, "Oh, I'm not sure. I'm only 12, my mom knows all that stuff about pregnancy." She immediately turned pale, took 3 steps back, and let out a nervous chuckle. I just stared at her, smiling and holding my stomach, as she mumbled something under her breath and walked away. I still try to come up with funny things to say in these situations because it still happens today. No one has ever put their hand on my stomach since that day, but I have been asked when I'm due so many times. If anyone has any good responses I could use as a 26-year-old, please let me know. Next story, XO entitled "She Thinks I Should Be Paying Bills for Her and the Guy She Cheated With." I found out my girlfriend of 11 years was cheating on me, with an unemployed dude, of all people. I'm not rich, but I provided her with a good lifestyle. I paid most of her bills, gave her a nice place to live, made sure her nails and hair were done regularly, took her on dates every weekend, and we went on a couple of vacations a year. She got used to that lifestyle and wanted to keep living it, even while cheating with a broke guy. She didn't admit to the cheating. I caught on to it. Once it was clear I was done with her, the entitlement really started to show. She said that because I had family in the area and she didn't, I should move out but continue paying the bills to give her and the new guy a chance to get on their feet. She also insisted on keeping my dogs and told me I could only see them if I asked the new guy. But since they didn't have any money, she said I needed to keep paying for food and vet bills. Instead, I kicked her out and kept my dogs. At that point, she was angry, and still felt entitled to my income. After I kicked her out, she claimed she was forced to quit her job because I forced her to relocate. Then she tried to sue me for lost wages. That didn't work out in her favor. You'd think she'd stop at this point, but she didn't. She contacted my work and threatened to sue them, claiming, "Your employees' actions cost me everything," and tried to demand they settle outside of court with her for $100,000. She didn't even make that much money. Instead, my work filed harassment charges against her. You'd think she'd stop at that point, but she didn't. She started messaging every family member of mine that she could find, telling them I cost her everything out of spite because she moved on with someone else. She said the least they could do was send her money to help her get a place and pay rent. When that didn't work, she went online and begged people to send money to her Cash App, claiming it was a domestic violence situation. I don't understand how she doesn't get that any financial support I gave her would end if she cheated on me. We weren't married. We don't have kids. I supported her for years. I owe her nothing. Certainly not to help her and her new relationship get on their feet. Somehow, this seems to come as a shock to her. Next story. Drinking on my doorstep? Get fired. Many years ago, I worked at an office in the city center, just a couple of blocks from my rented apartment. Because of the short distance, I often went home for lunch. It was so nice being able to relax at home in the middle of the workday, until summer came around. You see, there was a bar right next to the, very narrow, door leading from my building's stairwell to the street. Occasionally, I'd come home to find someone sitting on the doorstep, beer in hand, especially on weekends. Usually, I'd just politely say, "Sorry, bud, I need to get in here," and they'd invariably stand up and let me pass, usually replying with something like, "Oh, sorry, bud, back." It wasn't a big problem in my life, until one day. I came home for lunch and found a construction worker, around 50 years old, wearing a high-visibility vest and a safety hat, sitting on the doorstep with a half-drunk beer in his hand. As always, I said my usual "sorry, bud" phrase, but instead of standing up, this mother effer looked up at me with contempt, looked down again, and didn't move. I had to lean over him, unlock the door, and half squeeze past, half step over him. When it was time to head back to work, the douchebag was still sitting on the doorstep with a fresh beer in his hand, and still refused to move when I asked to pass. The same thing happened the next day. This time, He mumbled prick when I asked to get by. Now? I was absolutely fuming. Day after day, this piece of ST ruined my otherwise perfect lunch routine to the point that I didn't want to go home for lunch anymore. Sometimes, the guy was still sitting there when I came home at the end of my workday. But then, I got an idea. I took a longer lunch than usual, ate a sandwich on a bench diagonally across from my apartment, and watched him. Sure enough, he arrived at the bar, drank 3 beers on my doorstep, and, when he got up to leave, I followed him to his workplace just down the street. Here's where I got really lucky. He was working on a building project I knew pretty well because I'm a structural engineer, and my colleagues were the engineers for that project. I didn't know the douchebag's name, but with his goatee beard and mullet/ponytail haircut, he was pretty distinctive. So, I went to my colleagues' floor and asked them what they thought of the site manager for that project. They said, yeah, he's a good guy, professional, and meetings are always friendly. My eyes lit up. Well, next time you're on site, could you let him know that it's come to your attention that one of his guys is drinking at least 2 beers every lunchtime at name of bar and returning to work drunk? He's about 50, with brown hair, a goatee, and a mullet. 3 days later, my colleague told me that the site manager was fuming when he heard what they had to say. He immediately knew who the guy was and had zero tolerance for anyone being under the influence on site because they're a danger to others. The site manager decided to follow him at lunchtime, caught him sitting on my doorstep with a beer, and, as soon as the guy got back to the site after lunch, fired him on the spot. He made sure to do it in front of the other workers too. A. Send a message that such stupidity wouldn't be tolerated, and B. Ensure word got out about the guy being an irresponsible drunk. Good luck finding work in this town, FWAD. Our next story, some guy decided to get into my business, so I told him. The other day, I was at a local thrift store wearing a tank top and shorts. I tend to overheat easily, and I don't mind the cold, so it was a perfectly comfortable outfit for me. As I was minding my own business, an older guy, probably in his 30s, decided to walk up to me and start making comments. He asked me where my dad was and went on about how I clearly didn't have one because I was out dressed like that. He even added that if he were my dad, he'd never let me go out looking the way I did. Now, here's the thing. My dad passed away in 2022, and honestly, I was getting pretty tired of this guy harassing me, so I turned to him and said, well, if you must know, he's in a nice little green urn at my house, burnt to a crisp. So, he doesn't really get an opinion on what I can and cannot wear. The look on his face was priceless, completely traumatized and stunned. Definitely one of my proudest moments. Edit. I noticed some people felt offended when I referred to him as an older guy in his 30s. For context, I'm 19, so anyone over 25 automatically feels older to me.